welcome to the final round of the parliamentary tournament at NITOC. We're down to our two final teams, and before we do introductions and announcements, let's open with a word of prayer. Father, we thank you for the blessings that we have, the blessings of coming together and using the gift of speech, using the gift of logic and of thinking. God, these are gifts that you give. Lord, as you help us as we train and we learn how to use these gifts, that we would use them to glorify you. Be with these students, would you bless them, help them to think clearly, speak clearly, and Lord, would you just help us to enjoy the competition. Father, we ask your blessing on this evening, in Jesus' name, amen. One quick announcement I've been asked is to tell people no food or drink. I guess water's permissible, but nothing else in this auditorium. So if you have anything besides water, we would ask that you would leave with it, take it outside, and then come back. We will be introducing our judging panel first, and then we'll introduce our debaters. And to introduce our judges, we have two of our important leaders of STOA here to introduce the judges. So Angela Childress and Patsy Butman will introduce our judging panel.
We welcome a very distinguished panel of community judges and parents and alumni. And I'm going to first start with our community judges. And when I call your name, if you would just stand and acknowledge the audience, say hello, we love that. First is Nancy Campbell. Mrs. Nancy Campbell is a Carolina girl, but studied finance at the University of Georgia. She enjoyed a career in sales and marketing and is still involved with events management. She has helped found English and Scottish country dance societies all over the Southeast and coordinates a society of young people who coordinate and volunteer at premier political events. Mrs. Campbell and her husband Alexander have been married for 28 years and have 4 children. The 3 oldest are NCFCA alumni, and their youngest is still a current competitor. The family has been involved in the league for over 13 years. Nancy has been an invaluable part of Region 8 tournaments, serving in both judge hospitality and judge orientation, as well as judging many final rounds. Nancy's gracious, feminine propriety disguises her inner girl, who broke her arm one summer falling out of a tree when her back-row Kate got caught in a tree branch. Danielle Baker Gibbs. Danielle Gibbs is a native of Greenville, South Carolina, and was raised in Greer, where she attended Riverside High School. After obtaining her political degree in political science at Converse College, she worked for 4th District Congressman Jim DeMint from 2002 to 2005 as a constituent service representative. In 2009, Danielle became Regional Director of DeMint's Upstate Operations. She currently serves as the Upstate Manager for the United States Senator Tim Scott, who was appointed to the U.S. Senate in December of 2012 by Governor Nikki Haley. In this capacity, she serves as the eyes and ears of the Senator in Greenville, Spartanburg, and Union counties, and oversees internal operations for the region. Danielle is a graduate of Leadership Greenville Class 34 and has been honored as one of the Greenville's Business Magazine's best and brightest under 35. She and her husband Will are busy raising 3 children in the great city in the South. Presently serves as Magistrate Judge for Hendersonville, North Carolina. After graduating from Campbell University School of Law, he worked as an attorney in general law practice before his current position. Brent has formerly served as board members to E&C Williams, Southern Appalachian Biodiversity Project in Asheville, North Carolina, and Carolina Mountain Land Conservancy in Henderson, North Carolina. Brent attends Reformed Presbyterian Church in Hendersonville and enjoys playing alien pipes, trout fishing, hunting, horseback riding, and holds a 2nd degree black belt in Taekwondo. As you can see, we have a very diverse panel. Wendy and Annie graduated from Rockhurst University with a BS in Business Administration. She then moved to Washington, D.C. and worked as a staff assistant to the Chief Legal Counsel for the Senate Foreign Relations Committee under Senator Jesse Helms. Wendy took a break from politics while she and her husband Tim raised 5 children. Once her children were older, Wendy served as chairman of the Greenville County Republican Party. In 2008, Wendy was elected as representative to the South Carolina State House. She continues to serve in that capacity. Wendy is currently the chairman of the Greenville County Legislative Delegation and also serves as the chairman of the South Carolina Republican Women's Caucus. Her favorite pastime continues to be a grandma to Sadie. And then finally, Jonathan Field. We have another North Carolina witness. Jonathan Field is now in his 15th year as a coach, having joined the Charlotte Latin School faculty as Director of Forensics in 2013. Over his career, his students have claimed 8 state championships and 40 qualifications for NSDA nationals. During his tenures at East Chapel Hill High School, Manchester Essex Regional High School, and Harper School, his students advanced to late elimination rounds at nearly every major tournament, including Wake Forest, Yale, Emory, Stanford, Harvard, UC Berkeley, the TOC, and NCFL nationals. In 2007, 11, and 13, his students reached final round of Congress and dramatic interpretation at NSDA Nationals. Peel holds a BS in political science from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill.
Thank you very much, community judges, but thank you, parent and alumni judges. We're delighted that you're able to serve us. So we have Sherry Beers. So Sherry. Sherry is the wife and mother of 7, ages 7 to 28. Okay, that's remarkable right there. She's been participating in home education for 19 years, and she says, my family is my work experience. So I like that. She's been a part of the debate community for the past year. So thank you very much. Oh, 7 years. Okay, I can read that. Thank you very much. All right. And we have Alicia Stunkel. She says, I've been married to Gerald Stunkel Jr. for almost 21 years. Together we have one son, Raymond, who's finishing up the 11th grade. We've homeschooled for 9 years. She says, I have a bachelor's degree in business administration from Southern Wesleyan University. Also, I have over 20 years experience in corporate accounting. My husband and I own a trucking company that covers the Southeast. Her comments are, my own experience in high school speech and debate spurred my passion for the benefits of learning to speak in a public setting at a young age. So thank you very much, Alicia. We have our alumni, Jake Buxton. He says that his family has 2 wonderful parents and 2 very talented siblings. He also, his education is currently, he's a junior at Truman State University. He debated in the Truman State University LD policy team. He also graduated from STOA in 2013. He's competed for 3 years in STOA. He competed in duo, original, inter, Lincoln Douglas debate, and parliamentary debate. He was the 2-time Missouri State champion in Lincoln Douglas debate. He ranked 16th in the nation at the 2013 NITOC. So thank you very much, Jake. I think we may have had a change on one of our judges. Originally, I had slated Daniel Gert. Does someone have a profile on the additional judge? No? Did Patsy go to it? Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. If Blake, we might have you also stand if I miss one of the judges. Did I miss any? Yes. Debbie? It's on your sheet. Yes, let me introduce you. Okay. Well, I don't have this in front of me, but let me introduce Debbie Snyder. Debbie actually introduced STOA into the Virginia area, and so we're delighted with that. And she's been involved with speech and debate for multiple years, and in the homeschooling community, I believe, for about 20 years. Is that about right, Debbie? 27, excuse me. Okay, thank you very much. Debbie also serves on our speech committee, has been incredibly active as a coach for both for all three, parliamentary debate, team policy debate, as well as speech. So thank you very much, Debbie. I apologize for not having you. So I also wanted to take an opportunity to introduce our timekeeper for tonight. And so we have him here, Josiah McGee. So you raise your hand. We want to double check that the competitors can all see your hand signals real quickly, Josiah. Sounds okay? Gotcha. Do you have any instructions you need to offer to the competitors so they know?
We'll be counting down as usual. There'll be no hand slaps, so please keep track of the time yourself. You'll notice the 6-minute mark and the 1-minute mark. And I'll be offering hand signals all the minutes, 30 seconds, as well as 10-second mark. Timer will go off audibly at the 7-minute mark. Okay?
Good. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, so let's introduce our competitors in this final round. On the government side, from the Club of Verb from the great state of Washington, we have, let's see if I have this right, we have Charles Bates, right? And you will be member or? Member of government. Member of Gov. And we have Josiah Pop, and you'll be Prime Minister, representing the government. On the opposition, we have from the Vix's Fide in the great state of Texas, we have Brent Eldridge, and you will be a member of government. And a member of opposition, that matters. And we have Bailey Eldridge, and you will be the leader of opposition. So those are your debaters. We'll allow them to shake hands, and they will begin. Thank you all.
So awkwardly quiet. Right. Now are all of the judges ready?
As each of you speak, could you please give us your name and which speaker you are?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You know, if it helps, I can put my name tag outside of my coat. I'm sure you can read it.
Yes.
All right. Josiah Bob. Oh, is there something that both teams are a little unclear about? Are we asking for judging philosophies, or was that summed up in the paper? Oh, wait, the papers were read by the former officials, or are we not asking for judging philosophy?
Ask away. Do you have anything you'd like to add? Start out here that way.
I love good, clear organization and good clash and impact.
Same.
We'll see.
Give me voting machine. Yes, sir. Anyone else? Okay, sounds good.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, the opposition is ready?
Absolutely.
And Charles?
Yes.
All right, and all the judges. And because this is my last chance to say this in reference to former debater and my vast audience. Yeah, it never worked when he did it either. All right, let's start. Just because you have the right to something in America doesn't mean that you have the further right to steal it from your neighbor. Unfortunately, this notion that we can all run around philanthropically stealing from one another has pervaded American society to the core, resulting in one of the worst pieces of legislation to ever hit the floor of the House, Senate, or the President's desk, which isn't actually a floor. So first of all, let's do some resolutional analysis. What is today's resolution? It may surprise you. We're going with resolution number 3, which is resolution 1, the United States federal government should repeal the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act of 2000. Yeah, that's actually the resolution today. So first off, let's go with some resolutional analysis because this resolution is literally repeal Obamacare. So first off, let's go through some resolutional analysis. We'll define the Affordable Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act of 2009 as the technical term, the worst piece of legislation and biggest socialist commie monstrosity to ever hit the floor of the Senate or the President's desk or the House of Representatives. The only piece of legislation in U.S. history to measure on the Richter scale once it hit the floor because it's so huge. So let's move on and define what this resolution is. What kind of resolution is this? This is a policy resolution. It is asking us to take a specific course of action as the government, and it says should in the resolution, and it's providing a specific course of action. So we're going to be debating today whether or not Obamacare should stay in place. Now, I'd like to also point out the burden of the negative team, or actually the opposition of the team. Their opposition is to defend Obamacare in this round because they have to basically do the reverse of the resolution, which is the United States federal government should not repeal the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act of 2009. The burden for us is to prove that it should be repealed. The burden of the opposition is to prove that it should not be repealed. So also let's move on to some criteria for this debate round. The criteria, first and foremost, will be the constitution of this round because it is the supreme law of the land and it's not for any unreasonable purpose. Second of all, we'd like you to secondarily consider net benefits. So first off, let's go to the plan. The plan is we will do the resolution. Again, we will do the resolution, we will repeal Obamacare. Let's move on and talk about advantage number 1 of repealing the Affordable Care Act, the worst irony to ever exist. Advantage number 1 is individual rights. Again, individual rights. Respecting the Constitution is not something we do for fun. It's not something we do to philosophically tip our hats to the Founding Fathers. It is the defense of our way of life. And when we have strayed from it, it has resulted in the worst chapters in American history. So subpoint A here is individual mandate. Again, the individual mandate of Obamacare. It forces people to buy Obamacare-approved health care plans on state or federal exchanges, and if they don't, well, they pay a fine. This is like, I'm pretty sure if King George was around today, he'd be pretty enthralled to know that he could tax the patriots and the colonists for not buying tea. Subpoint B is personal control is best. Again, personal control is superior because when we're talking about free market competition, which is empirically the best system of government and the best economic system, when we're talking about that, the lost competition, because government sanctions some plans but not others, results in subpoint C. First of all, it is immoral. It is absolutely immoral. One of my favorite political commentators, Ben Shapiro, once wrote in his book, How Leftism Violates All 10 of the Commandments, he wrote, the government's entire purpose is to use its monopoly on the use of force to enforce rights to life, liberty, and property. As soon as government goes beyond that, it is by definition, according to the Declaration of Independence, illegitimate government. Impact 1 is loss of doctors. Again, loss of doctors. Because of the lost competition between healthcare providers, fewer doctors are available as they get priced out of the market by corrupt medical practitioners and basically federally sanctioned healthcare plans. The internalized impact of this is the fact that once we start losing doctors, maybe access to healthcare or the right to healthcare is a lot better, but you don't actually get the healthcare when it comes down to it. Advantage number 2 is religious freedom. Again, religious freedom. Subpoint A here is requires birth control. Again, requires coverage of birth control. Whether you're talking about the morning after pill, the week after pill, or any sort of contraceptive or basically quasi-abortion pill or medication, Obamacare makes people, basically, like literally, forces people to provide those in the forms of taxes and fees. This infringes upon the religious institutions that found this country. Subpoint B is forcing immorality. Again, forcing immorality. Let's just say for a minute that it's objective that abortion is wrong, but even if that wasn't the case, the kind of forcing on this immorality leads to the degradation of American society by destroying religious institutions upon which philanthropic thought and action rely. Also, this results in lawsuits by the hundreds, literally hundreds Hundreds of lawsuits have been levied against the Affordable Care Act, which wastes time, which wastes money, which wastes energy, and all of that could be used to be putting into private sector or charity or anything else aside from fighting the worst thing on earth. So also let's move on to the subpoint C. It's a step towards tyranny. Again, it's a step towards tyranny. Maybe this is a little, some people would deem this irrational or extremist to talk about. But let's remember, first goal of Mao in China was to ensure the eradication of religion. And once you start destroying religious freedom, it destroys the fabric that holds the morals of the United States together. Because when men are left to rule themselves, they fail. And that is what we've seen in Soviet Russia, from Mao's China to Pol Pot Cambodia to any other dictatorship on the face of the earth seeking to end religious freedom. The impact of this is the violation of rights. Forcing people to violate their conscience and provide what is essentially abortion services against their will, against their own religion, would be enshrined in American law, literally is enshrined in American law. Advantage number 3 is medical crisis averted. Again, medical crisis averted. Subpoint A is bad grades, and I mean that in the most literal sense possible. Doctors in America have graded Obamacare, and 46% of them give them a D to an F. When you have nearly half of the doctors in America disapproving of Obamacare, that should be a pretty good indicator that it's not exactly the best thing on earth. Also, let's move on and talk about subpoint B. Subpoint B is emergency room SWAT. Again, emergency room SWAT. Even assuming that people do not buy state-approved healthcare plans, that ensures that our emergency rooms are swamped by people coming in without health insurance and basically destroys the opportunity for people that have really, really bad emergencies to deal with. Subpoint 3, or actually subpoint C, is they earn less. There is literally a section of Obamacare which appoints a council to ensure that doctors are paid less in the name of fairness. Okay, fine. There's literally a council in Obamacare which sees to it that doctors are paid less than they are actually supposed to. The impact of this is doctor shortage. Again, doctor shortage. Now, if we were in America to not have doctors, that would obviously be a pretty bad thing. But here's some numbers for you. Almost all of the doctors in America right now are 55 or older. That literally means that they're going to be retiring soon. And Obamacare is disincentivizing new doctors from entering the field because it is so expensive, and who wants to be forced to do things against their will all the time? This impact is no health coverage no matter how good it is. Again, no health coverage no matter how good it is. The medical crisis in America is coming. Just because we haven't seen it doesn't mean it's not going to happen. Thank you.
Hello. I'm going to have to get used to this without having an echo. All right. Are the judges ready? Okay. And the government team? All right. Out of all the jokes of Obamacare, I'm surprised the government team is one of the most important ones. That was actually by Democrats themselves. We're going to have to pass the plan to know what's in it. And at the end of the day, even though Obamacare is thousands of pages of terrible stuff, the intent of it was good, was to provide better health care to the United States citizens. And the interesting thing is, if we actually spend the time to go through and read it, there's actually, shockingly, some provisions in there that are actually what Americans would support if you ask them outside of Obamacare or the Patient Affordable Care Act, would you agree with this? And we look at that idea, that's exactly what the opposition team believes in today's debate round. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, at least that's what we say in the South. Now, I'm going to be going through some resolution analysis points before I get any further. The first one was that of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, PPACA, or the ACA for short, or Obamacare if you want to use the slang term. Any of them work. At the end of the day, that's basically what it is. We agree its definition, although not the communist, the long one full of rhetoric, but the point that this was obviously what we all know to be Obamacare. The second thing we want to add, so, is the definition of repeal. Repeal means revoking or annulling a congressional act completely, getting rid of the entire bill and all the provisions in it. Just make sure that's clarified. Obviously, they're not being, we agree. Woo! The next point here is that this is a policy resolution. We also agree to that. Now, their point underneath the reverse of the resolution, I'm actually going to disagree with this on this one. What we as the opposition team have to do is oppose the affirmative team and their policy. In today's debate round, consider we're debating policies, let's figure out what the best policy for Americans are, which is why the opposition teams will be providing a counter plan, a counter policy that says, believes that this is better than what they're providing, and it's not the same thing. Now, as far as their constitution and net benefits goes, we'll agree with that. With that said, let me get to this counter plan. This will be passed by Congress and the President. Mandate 1 is repeal Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, but keep the following provisions, which are in Obamacare, in place. Subpoint A, young adults staying on their parents' plan until they turn 26. Subpoint B, ban insurance from denying coverage to people with pre-existing conditions. Subpoint C, Medicare donut hole fix. That'll be a fun one to talk about. accountable care organizations, and the final one is tax credits to small businesses who provide coverage. This will be enforced by the Health and Human Services and any other necessary agency. Money will come from the federal budget, timeline, blah, 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 terms and conditions apply. Next point, let's look at the contentions from the last team. Now, their next point is that we don't just tip our hats to founding fathers, which is great because I did bring a hat, and I think that's actually Lincoln. So we don't have to just tip our hats to founding fathers. We do believe in individual rights, which is why we should keep the original provisions that I just mentioned in place. At the end of the day, we get all of those disadvantages that were brought up against Obamacare. None of that applies to the opposition team's case, but we keep in the provisions that actually are benefiting Americans today, that actually make the reforms necessary. As much as there's thousands of pages and additional gunk and junk that we don't need anymore, our policy is better and that it preserves that that's actually helping Americans. As far as personal control superior, I'll be talking about that underneath accountable care organizations, or ACOs. And as far as all their points about loss of doctors, birth control, forcing morality, obviously we're repealing those parts of it, but we're keeping the following provisions in place. So as far as all the core contentions went, they don't happen underneath an opposition ballot. But there's a few reasons why we should go opposition still. The first contention in favor of the opposition team's counterplan is needed health reform. Needed health reform. Subpoint A is dependent coverage. The Department of Labor said 30% of young adults are uninsured, and that's higher than any other age group. This is because they have the lowest rate of access. Young adults like me who are entering college don't have a full-time job that comes with medical benefits attached to them. Many teenagers or young adults underneath the age of 26 are working part-time jobs. They don't have the same access to health care coverage that our parents and older Americans do, and that's caused us to be uninsured. By keeping the provisions that allow Americans to stay on their parents' plans until they turn 26, we benefit Americans in that way because it's also pretty popular, as we'll be hearing my next contention. But subpoint B is pre-existing conditions coverage. Pre-existing conditions coverage. Now, right now, currently, there's 13 million Americans who are non-elderly that are denied due to pre-existing conditions. Meaning, if you had cancer, even in your past, if you've already beat it, you're still beat down by the insurance companies who believe that that pre-existing coverage is a risk to them. And that's according to the Commonwealth Fund, as far as we know for that statistic. In addition, 21% get turned down. They're either turned down, charged an increased cost, or given a plan that doesn't cover their needs. So for Americans that have pre-existing conditions, some of which is not even that person's fault, this policy keeping that specific provision in place would help them greatly. Subpoint C is the donut hole, because it's not just debaters who use food analogies, it's also the government. Now, what the donut hole basically says is that enrollees are financially dependent for this gap. You're covered initially for a certain percentage on prescription drugs. Then there's a part where you have to pay for it until you reach a certain limit. So let's say the first $500 of your prescription drug coverage is paid for. Then you've got a gap of maybe $500 until you hit your $1,000 limit, at which point they'll pay for whatever left. It's a lot more than $500, so I pretty much can guarantee you that. Now, the Department of Health and Human Services said about 1/4 of Part D enrollees hit the donut hole and stop taking their medications, which means there's Americans on Medicare that are not actually getting coverage or their prescription drugs that they need for their health. Subpoint D is decreased health, and that costs our workforce about $576 billion annually, not even taking account the toll that it takes on people's lives when they have a decreased quality of life due to health concerns. Second contention is popular provisions. Popular provisions. 61% favors young adults staying on their parents' insurance, according to a Reuters poll. 82% of Americans believe that pre-existing condition protection is a good idea. 81% believe that the donut hole should be covered, and 88% believe in tax credits to small businesses. All of this is supported by the American public, and none of this harms individual rights or the Constitution or causes any of the problems we ran at the last point. That brings me to my third contention, ACOs, or accountable care organizations. What this is it's 7 pages of the law, and what it does is it provides incentives, quality benchmarks, to ensure that doctors are actually benefited by keeping their patients out of the hospitals and taking care of chronically ill and managing their symptoms. This is slated to save Medicare $940 million within the first 4 years. And there's freedom for patients in that they can even go outside of these networks of doctors and hospitals, and they have the freedom to do so. So looking at the policies that have been presented, yes, Obamacare, we can roast it all we want, but at the end of the day, there's some diamonds in the rough that ought to be protected, and that's what the opposition team and the government team doesn't. Thank you.
everybody hear me fine? Okay, let's go ahead and begin. It's going to be very interesting. I'd like to go in and just begin by responding to the arguments that they brought up, specifically looking at their counterplan. We agree with all of their agreements to our first definitions and resolutional analysis, obviously. So let's go ahead and talk about the arguments. It was a little bit confusing at first because it was repeal and then keep, which you can't really do at the same time, but let's go into it. They talked about how they're forcing companies to include these pre-existing laws where the insurance companies have to include insurance for the insurance policies that they already have, a little bit redundant. My response to this is that they are forcing companies. They are forcing companies. Instead of a free market approach, they are requiring these companies to keep these current insurance policies by keeping these amendments or provisions under Obamacare, which is not a good thing, which I'm going to be talking about later. The idea behind this, the reason this is bad is because of the Constitution, which they agreed with, that the Constitution is something that should be upheld in today's debate round. But when the federal government is going over its bounds and forcing a company to require, insurance for these pre-existing laws, instead of making up their own decisions on what the best is for the company and for the person themselves, you lose constitutional rights on it. Yes, one or two questions, please.
You would agree that even in a free market, you would agree that even in a free market, we still put regulations on businesses to provide some protection for customers.
We do put some regulations, but we don't. In this specific instance, we should not be forcing them to do something that is bad for the company or could be bad for the company. The Constitution allows for the federal government to deal with interstate commerce and environmental protections and constitutional stuff like that, but it does not allow for insurance companies. It doesn't allow the federal government to require insurance companies to have insurance for these pre-existing plans. Basically, they're saying Obamacare, get rid of Obamacare, but keep the part that says add these requirements, the requirements that are already there. So my second response is that these are pre-existing conditions, which we're going to be talking about next under a PERM and sort of a counter plan. It's going to be very confusing. So let's go on to the PERM, is that the negative team hasn't really given you they haven't really given you an example why you should be voting against the government team. They just said that you should be voting for the opposition team because of the provisions. So the counter plan is everything that they brought up in their counter plan except for the pre-existing requirements. So we allow the 26-year-old kids to be on their family plans until they're 26. We allow for the prescription drugs, but we're not going to be requiring this because it leads to anti-federalism and in turn tyranny, which is the next step towards tyranny. So the reason we have this counter plan, I have two reasons for this, two justifications. First of all, as we discussed under the first Prime Minister's speech and the Leader of Opposition speech, is that the Constitution is a criterion for today's debate round. So at the end of the day, who can best uphold the Constitution is the one that you should be voting for, because that's one of the criteria that we brought up. So this is a counter plan, and it's a constructive speech. I have the ability to change our mandates because it is constructive, so that we can best uphold the Constitution while still having all of the benefits that the negative team or the opposition team has tried to bring up with their counter plan. The second justification is that of the free market. The insurance companies will have the option of denying or accepting more people not under the pre-existing conditions. They're going to make their own decisions. The government should not be in there requiring companies to do specific things. That's not what the Constitution allows for. The Constitution is being violated in here, I believe, under the 10th Amendment, which says that any powers that are not left up to the federal government is specifically required to the states. They go above their bounds. They go above the 10th Amendment. So at the end of the day, what the government team does with the original plan and the counter plan, the PERM and all these technical terms, is that we have the best option for the day by repealing Obamacare, except leaving the kids that go up to 26 staying on the family plan, the prescription drugs, and everything that is not the pre-existing law requirements for insurance companies. We do all of that. We do all of the benefits, except we don't take another step towards tyranny. And I'd like to run an advantage talking about how federalism will be restored, talking about how it is being harmed right now, and we're taking more and more steps towards tyranny by allowing government to take over companies, take over states, without having any repercussions or stopping them from doing that. So the advantage that federalism restored, my first subpoint A, is that they are currently outside their boundaries. They're currently outside their boundaries. If you vote for the opposition team or the current system, you are outside their boundaries because the federal government is taking over states and insurance companies by force of injuries. Yes, second or third question.
So you would agree that there are provisions in Obamacare that are useful for Americans?
Yes, but not the one that allows the requirements for the insurance companies to pay insurance for pre-existing plans. If, let's say, cell phone providers, when you switch plans, you don't keep the same phone, you don't keep the same system, you completely switch over. It's not how it works. The federal government should not be in charge of forcing insurance companies to uphold pre-existing plans under Obamacare, that part that they are repealing. Basically, they're saying, we're going to repeal this, however, all the things you have in the current system, while Obamacare was in place, you still have to uphold because for the federal government, we say you have to do this. So subpoint A was that they're outside their boundaries. Subpoint B is that it's a step towards tyranny. Step towards tyranny. They're outside their bounds on the 10th and 11th Amendment. I'm not sure if it's the 11th Amendment. Basically, they don't have the right to do this. They're taking more and more steps to tyranny. When you violate federalism, which is the idea of two houses in the government, which is federal government and state government, where they are equal and they have tension with each other. When that is violated and the federal government takes over the states, all we see is the federal government continuing on this path of taking over states, requiring them to do things that is not in their constitutional provisions, that is not constitutionally allowed. So at the end of the day, the impact is that we are closer to anti-tyranny, we're closer to removing tyranny in the United States. Basically, Obama has stepped in, has violated federalism. We're taking that step back, keeping some of the provisions the opposition team has asked for and said are good. However, we don't require, the unconstitutional part. As I talked about, net benefits and constitutional, both criteria is upheld by both teams. If whichever team can uphold net benefits and the criteria of the Constitution being upheld should be voted for at the end of the day. So I please ask you to vote because we keep some of the provisions while upholding the Constitution and creating net benefits. Thanks so much.
Okay, all the judges ready? Okay, and the government team. Then I'll go ahead and begin. I know that the opposition team has an uphill battle when it comes to trying to convey to a group of mostly conservative people that Obamacare is a good thing, almost about as difficult as explaining to 12-year-olds that Justin Bieber isn't a good singer. However, what I would like to address is that there are some diamond in the rough pieces with Obamacare that we should keep in place, as the government team seemed to agree with us in their last speech. However, what they wanted to do was take advantage of what we provided in the analysis that, as the opposition team, we came up with, and try to take it on as their own, to be able to fulfill a resolution that asks them to repeal it completely. Some people would call this a permutation and debate. I kind of like to call it plagiarism. Just kidding, guys. So what I would like to go ahead and go through is the contentions brought up by the last speaker, and just explain to you why them trying to take ownership of the plan that we came up with really doesn't uphold the resolution to repeal Obamacare. As they laid out in their first speech, they've been pretty contradictory throughout the last two speeches. So first and foremost, he talked about contention that forcing companies, or pretty much insurance companies, to provide coverage to people with pre-existing conditions is unconstitutional, and how we need to let the free market do its thing. My first response is that there's no free market alternative. Again, there's no free market alternative. Whether you vote government or opposition, government voting for them would mean that we go back to pre-Obamacare existence. What that means is that you have 50 broken up states having their own broken and fragile systems of healthcare versus the opposition team that still allows for a unified federal healthcare benefit without keeping the restrictions in place that we deemed bad by the government team in the very beginning of this round. My second response here is that it's favored by most Americans. As my partner pointed out, I'm so sorry.
Okay, so my question is, you agree that this entire round is based upon Constitution and net benefits, right?
Yeah, I could agree to that. So let's go ahead and talk about Constitution. The Constitution, I'm pretty sure that was the document that said we the people. And we the people want to keep the benefits that my partner laid out in her first speech. We had numerous polls saying that the majority of Americans want to keep those 5 exceptions in place single congressman represented getting different funding for millions of different things in that big giant book that we like to call the bill. I would call it more like an encyclopedia. Next, let's talk about their point that they said that the companies, we shouldn't be forcing companies. Believe it or not, companies weren't that affected when it came to Obamacare being put in place. According to the Mercer organization, or the Mercer Foundation, between 2014 and 2015, when most of Obamacare was implemented, we saw no difference between business representation of providing health care to their business and their employees. So what we can see here is that the businesses haven't really been affected by Obamacare in the long term, and we haven't really forced them to do anything that they weren't doing beforehand. So whenever it comes to we can't be forcing businesses, Obamacare really didn't change that. However, those points that they brought up about the religious discrimination due to the birth control benefits or benefits provided by Obamacare, they essentially don't apply here because neither team are advocating for that in this debate round. Next, they brought up a permutation, which is a big debate word for we're going to steal your Pop-Tart. Meaning, what the government team wanted to do was take our plan because we didn't necessarily negate their plan of repealing it completely, therefore they wanted to take ownership of it. However, my partner's entire speech was about how we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater and we shouldn't repeal it completely, which brings me to a few other responses. My first response here is, yes, go ahead.
So, you say that we stole your plan. Didn't you kind of do the same thing?
Absolutely not. You guys repeal it completely. We leave in certain conditions. That's two completely different plans. They're not mutually exclusive. Next, let's talk about my response for that of a moving target. The issue is if you agree to them being able to take our Pop-Tart, what we can see is that my partner wasted her entire speech negating their plan with an alternative, which means that who knows, in the next speech they might get up in here and say, let's all pay for everyone in this room to go to Disney World like Oprah. However, that might be a great idea, that there's really no way for us to debate. And what that leads to is a decreased educational debate because we were very clear.
Only one team in this debate round which garners support of the Constitution. Because the only thing that matters in this debate round, because both teams agreed upon that, let's conclude NITOC with the government ballot. Thank you.
Could everyone remain seated while we escort our judges? Excuse me, could everyone please remain seated while we escort our judges out? Thank you.